A quiet winter afternoon in Maryland. Nothing special, no car horns, no shouting, just the familiar chill that permeates the streets, where people stop at convenience stores to buy a bottle of water, a package, and then continue with their lives. None of them knew that, in just a few minutes, that place would become the scene of a murder. No one knew that a fleeting moment, a quick decision, would claim a human life and trigger an irreversible chain of tragedy. But what makes this story so haunting isn't just the gunshot inside the store. It's what happened afterward. The terrifying calmness of the man leaving the scene, the door of the apartment across the street, and the truth that was hidden in the shadows for weeks. This is not just the story of one victim, not just a seemingly random case. This is the story of 3 lives, of the pain of those left behind, and of a question no one can fully answer. Why did an ordinary afternoon turn into a nightmare? His name is Ayalu Wandu, 61 years old, a man whose face you probably wouldn't remember after just a few minutes if you met him on the street. Not because he's unremarkable, but because he's like so many others. People who live quietly, work quietly, and never imagine their story will become a headline in the news. Ayalu works at a small convenience store. Every day, he stands behind the counter, greeting customers with his deep, familiar voice. He sees all kinds of people pass by, those in a hurry, those tired, those who just need a glass of water to get through the day. The job isn't glamorous, it's not praised by anyone, but it sustains him and is a part of the neighborhood's rhythm of life. For Ayalu, life is measured by very simple things: opening hours, closing times, cold afternoons, returning home after a day's work. He doesn't seek trouble, nor does he aspire to anything grand. He's just a man trying to live each day to the fullest in the quietest way possible. No one deserves to die just for doing their job. No one deserves to pass away on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. And Ayalu Wandu, a very ordinary man, could have gone home like any other day. Just minutes before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the glass doors of the convenience store opened. A man walked in. No one paid any particular attention. No one turned to look. In a store like this, hundreds of footsteps pass by every day, and that man was just one of them. He wasn't in a hurry, not rushed. He walked slowly along the shelves, his eyes scanning each item as if deep in thought. Security cameras captured his gait, suspiciously normal. There was no sign that, in just a few minutes, this place would become a crime scene. He stopped in front of the beverage shelf. He took a bottle of iced tea. He held it in his hand. Then he walked towards the cashier's counter, where Ayalu was standing, doing her usual job. 2 people, 2 lives, 2 completely different worlds. Yet at that moment, they had no idea that their destinies were about to intersect in the most cruel way. The man placed the bottle of iced tea on the counter. He said little. He didn't smile. He didn't seem friendly. He opened the bottle and took a sip right in front of Ayalu. A small, seemingly harmless action, but in that cramped space, it created an unsettling feeling that was difficult to describe. He didn't pay. No explanation. No permission. The atmosphere in the shop suddenly became heavy. There was no arguing, but a simmering tension, like a taut string that no one knew when it would snap. Ayalu stood there, facing the stranger, in a situation he neither wanted nor prepared for. In that moment, everything could still have stopped. Just one person turning away, just one step back. But fate chose a different path. And just minutes later, that fragile normalcy would shatter completely. Everything happened so fast that no one in the shop had time to understand what was really happening. All they knew was that the atmosphere suddenly changed, as if an invisible pressure was weighing heavily on the small, cramped room. The man standing at the counter began to become aggressive, no longer the initial uncomfortable silence, but a defiant, cold attitude. Then he threw something at Ayalu. It was a sudden action, causing the 61-year-old man to flinch reflexively. Ayalu did what many in that situation might have done. He reached behind him, grabbed a stick, and swung it in self-defense. Not to attack, just to create distance. To protect himself in that moment when he felt threatened right in his familiar workplace. But that split-second reaction led to consequences that no one could reverse. The man instantly pulled out a gun. No hesitation, no warning. A gunshot echoed in the cramped space, shattering the quiet of the winter afternoon. Ayalu fell behind the cash register, where he had stood for countless days of his life. And then, something happened that sent chills down the spines of everyone who watched the footage. The shooter bent down and picked up the iced tea bottle. Dried. The first call to 911 comes in almost immediately. The voice on the other end is shaking, words stumbling over each other, as panic and disbelief collide in real time. The caller tries to explain what they have just seen: a man shot, blood on the floor, a moment that does not feel real yet. The dispatcher asks simple questions. Is he breathing? Where is the wound? Can you apply pressure? Each question carries hope. The quiet hope that maybe, somehow, help will arrive in time. But the answers come slower now, softer. He is barely breathing. He was shot in the chest, near the heart. Then there is a pause, a long one. The caller says it out loud, almost as if saying it might make it true. He is gone. He is dead. At 3.06 inches the afternoon, police and first responders rush into the store. They move fast, trained, focused, doing everything they can. But sometimes effort is not enough. Sometimes time wins. Ayalu Wandu lies behind the counter where he worked day after day. The place that once felt ordinary is now frozen in shock. Outside, life continues. Cars pass. People walk by. And inside that small store, a family has just lost someone who will never come home. As officers begin securing the scene, speaking with witnesses and employees, one detail slowly rises above the noise. It is not something found on the floor or captured clearly on camera. It is something far more unsettling. The sus. The store manager hesitates at first, then says it plainly. He has seen that man before. Not once, not twice, almost every day. The same face standing outside the store, asking customers for money. The same presence lingering near the entrance, watching people come and go. Sometimes he was quiet. Other times, aggressive. When people refused to give him money, his tone would change. His posture would stiffen. Employees had felt uncomfortable for weeks, even months. They had called the police before, more than once. And then comes the sentence that makes the room go silent. Last week, when the manager asked him to leave, the man did not just argue. He threatened. He said he would shoot him. At the time, it sounded like anger, like empty words thrown into the air. No one believed he meant it. No one believed he would come back inside with a gun. But now, standing in a store where a man lies dead, those words echo differently. This was not random. This was not sudden. This was a warning that went unheard. In that moment, the case shifts. What once looked like a senseless act begins to feel preventable. And that realization weighs heavily on everyone in the room. With the scene secured, the focus shifts outward. Somewhere beyond the store walls, a man with a gun is walking free. Officers know what that means. Every minute that passes increases the risk. Every street, every doorway, every bus stop becomes a question mark. Descriptions are repeated again and again. Clothing, height, the direction he walked. Patrol cars spread through the neighborhood, lights flashing against winter dusk. A helicopter lifts into the sky, its steady hum pressing down on the streets below. People look up from sidewalks and parking lots, sensing danger even if they do not yet understand it. Investigators work quickly, but carefully. Panic helps no one. They retrace the suspect's path, scanning cameras, knocking on doors, asking residents if they saw anything unusual. Some people shake their heads. Others offer fragments. A man walking alone. A figure crossing the street. Nothing certain. Nothing solid. What makes the pressure unbearable is what they already know. This man does not drive. He walks. He knows the area. He blends in. He could be anywhere within minutes. For the officers involved, this is not just a case. It is a responsibility. They are not only searching for a suspect, they are trying to stop the next tragedy before it happens. And as daylight fades, the sense of urgency tightens, like a breath held too long. Hours pass with no arrest. The night settles in, cold and heavy. Investigators begin to widen their search, reviewing footage from nearby businesses and intersections. Then, someone looks across the street. Directly opposite the store stands a tall apartment building, a place where people live ordinary lives. They come home from work. They carry groceries. They close their doors and feel safe. Inside that building, there are cameras. Footage from one of them reveals something chilling. Just minutes after the shooting, the suspect appears. Not running, not hiding. He is walking calmly toward the entrance. He crosses the street without hesitation, as if he knows exactly where he is going. The timestamp reads, just after 3 o'clock. He enters the building, climbs the stairs. Step by step, his posture relaxed, his movement steady. In his hand, he is still holding the same bottle he took from the store. For investigators, this moment changes everything. The man they are searching for is not fleeing the area. He is not panicked. He is going home. And behind one of those apartment doors, something is waiting. Something no one is prepared to find. By the early hours of the next morning, investigators are no longer guessing. They have an address. They have a suspect. And they know he is dangerous. The decision is made quickly. This will not be a simple knock on the door. A SWAT team assembles outside the apartment building. Helmets on, weapons ready, movements quiet and precise. In the hallway, the air feels heavy, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. Neighbors remain behind closed doors, unaware that something terrible is unfolding just a few steps away. The team reaches the apartment. There is no response from inside. The door is breached. What they find is not chaos, but neglect. The apartment is cold, cluttered, bare. A thin mattress lies on the floor near the kitchen, and on it, a man is sleeping, calm, unbothered, as if nothing in the world is wrong. That man is Tory Moore. He is taken into custody without resistance. He does not shout. He does not ask why. He simply looks around as officers secure the space. But as they move deeper into the apartment, something changes. A smell hangs in the air, sharp, unmistakable. It stops them in their tracks. In a nearby room, partially hidden, officers discover a body, a woman, decomposed, unrecognizable at first glance. In that moment, the case explodes into something far darker. What began as a shooting investigation has just become something else entirely. At first, investigators assume the worst. The woman found inside the apartment must be his mother. It is the only explanation that seems to fit in that moment. No one else was supposed to be living there. No one else had been reported missing from that address. As officers escort Tori out of the apartment, one of them begins the routine process, checking pockets, securing belongings, asking basic questions. Then Tori speaks. He says he needs his phone. He says he wants to text his mother. He needs to let her know where he is. The hallway goes quiet. The words hang in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. If he needs to text his mother, then the woman inside the apartment is not her. That simple sentence tears apart the only explanation they had. Investigators look at one another. What they thought was a tragic but contained discovery suddenly opens into something far more disturbing. A new question replaces all the others. If that woman is not his mother, then who is she? And how long has she been there? In that moment, the case crosses a line. It is no longer just about a shooting. It is about a truth that has been hidden in plain sight. The woman found inside the apartment finally has a name. Her name is Denise Middleton. She is 26 years old. She is not a stranger. She is not a passerby. She is not someone forgotten by the world. Denise is Tory Moore's girlfriend. And more than that, she is carrying his child. 8.5 months pregnant. In another version of this story, Denise would be preparing for motherhood, choosing baby clothes, thinking about names, wondering what her child would look like, who he would become. She had already chosen his name, Ezekiel, a name full of hope, of beginnings, of a future that felt just within reach. Denise's life had not been easy. She had known instability. She had moved through shelters and assistance programs, trying to find solid ground. Like many young women in similar situations, she was doing her best with what she had, leaning on the people she trusted, believing that love might offer safety. Instead, she disappeared quietly. No missing persons report, no alarm raised in time. Her absence went unnoticed while the world moved on, while days passed, then weeks, while her body lay in a small apartment and her unborn child with her. When investigators connect the details, the weight of the case becomes unbearable. This is no longer one victim. It is no longer one moment of violence. It is 3 lives erased. Denise, her baby, and Ayalu Wandu. The story changes here. It stops being about how someone died and becomes about who they were, about a young woman who should have lived, about a child who never had the chance, and about the silence that allowed it all to happen. As investigators begin piecing together the timeline, the truth emerges slowly, and it is almost impossible to absorb. Denise did not die days before she was found. She did not die the night before the shooting at the store. She had been dead for nearly 2 months. 2 months. During that time, life outside the apartment continued as normal. People went to work. Neighbors passed each other in the hallway. The seasons shifted toward winter. And inside that small apartment, Denise's body remained where she fell, hidden from view, hidden from help, hidden from dignity. What makes this truth so disturbing is not only the length of time, but what it implies. Tory Moore did not flee. He did not abandon the apartment. He stayed. He slept there. He ate there. He lived his daily life in the same space where Denise and her unborn child lay in silence. Investigators find no signs of panic, no evidence of an attempt to seek help. Instead, there is only neglect and avoidance, a choice repeated every day to do nothing. Security footage from the building captures the last known images of Denise alive. She stands quietly in an elevator, her body turned away. She wipes tears from her face. She follows Tory out, slowly, reluctantly. That is the final moment anyone sees her breathing. After that, there is only absence. The realization settles heavily over the investigation. This was not a momentary lapse. It was not confusion. It was a prolonged denial of humanity. And once that truth is understood, the case is no longer just horrifying. It is profoundly heartbreaking. Inside the interrogation room, the energy shifts. The chaos of the investigation gives way to quiet walls, a table, 2 chairs, and a man who now has nowhere to go. Tory Moore sits across from detectives, calm on the surface, almost conversational. He does not look like someone carrying the weight of what has happened, and that in itself is unsettling. He speaks easily. He drifts between thoughts. At times he sounds reflective, at other times defensive. He talks about his past, about homelessness, about feeling misunderstood by the world. He describes moments of anger as if they were accidents, things that simply happened to him rather than choices he made. Then he says something that stops the room. He talks about writing a book, about this story being important, about how it could be famous one day. For investigators, this is a glimpse into his inner world, a place where reality bends around his own narrative, where events are reframed, not by harm done to others, but by how they affect him. There is little mention of Ayalu, little acknowledgement of Denise, almost no space given to the unborn child. When asked about the store, Tory minimizes. He says he was provoked, that he felt threatened, that he reacted. When asked about Denise, his answers stretch and twist. He avoids direct statements. He circles the truth without ever landing on it. Detectives listen carefully. They do not interrupt. They know that people often reveal more in what they choose not to say, in the pauses, in the deflections, in the way responsibility is always placed somewhere else. What emerges is not just a suspect, but a portrait. A man who sees himself as the center of every story. A man who believes explanation can replace accountability. And a man whose words, stripped of emotion, reveal a chilling absence of remorse. In that small room, the investigators begin to understand that the violence did not come from nowhere. It came from a mind that had already learned to disconnect from the humanity of others. As the interrogation continues, investigators already know something Tori does not fully grasp. The truth is no longer dependent on his words. It is written elsewhere, in data, in records, in the silent trail he left behind. His phone becomes one of the most revealing witnesses. Inside it are searches made in the days and weeks after Denise disappeared. Questions typed late at night. How long before a body starts to smell? How to move a body without being seen? How to plead insanity? Each search is deliberate. Each one strips away the idea of confusion or shock. There are travel records too. Bus routes, movements across states, long distances covered, not in panic, but in planning. He left, he returned, all while Denise remained where she had been left, unseen and unreported. For investigators, this is the moment the case hardens. These are not the actions of someone frozen by fear. They are the actions of someone actively avoiding responsibility. Someone who knew exactly what had happened and chose silence instead of help. The evidence speaks calmly, without emotion. It does not argue. It does not explain. It simply exists. And together, the pieces form a picture that cannot be rewritten. Whatever story Tori tells himself, the facts remain unchanged. Denise did not vanish. She was left behind. Ayalu was not an accident. He was shot, and the unborn child never had a choice. In the face of evidence like this, denial becomes meaningless. The truth no longer needs to be confessed. It has already been proven. The courtroom is quiet in a way that feels different from silence anywhere else. This is not the silence of shock or fear. It is the silence of waiting. Families sit on opposite sides of the room, bound together by a tragedy they never chose to share. Ayalu Wandu's loved ones are there, people who knew him not as a victim, but as a father, a relative, a man who showed up to work every day and never came home. Denise Middleton's family is there too, carrying a grief that is harder to name. They lost a daughter, they lost a sister, and they lost a child who was never given the chance to take a first breath. Tori Moore sits at the defense table. He does not address the court. He does not look back. He offers no apology, no explanation that could ease the pain in the room. The charges are read. Not one life lost, not two, but three. The law recognizes the unborn child as a victim as well, a reality that lands heavily on everyone listening. When the verdict is delivered, there is no sense of victory. Justice does not feel like relief here. It feels like acknowledgement, an official recognition that what happened mattered, that these lives were real, and that their loss will not be dismissed as a footnote. Tori Moore is sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison, with no meaningful hope of freedom. The gavel falls. The case is closed, on paper. But for the families left behind, the sentence marks not an ending, but a permanent absence that no courtroom can ever truly resolve. When stories like this end, there is often a temptation to close the book and move on, to tell ourselves that justice has been served, that the danger is gone, that the chapter is finished. But some stories do not end cleanly. They stay with us because they remind us how fragile ordinary life truly is. Ayalu Wandu went to work one afternoon and never came home. Denise Middleton trusted someone she loved and was never given the chance to become the mother she was preparing to be. Ezekiel, a child with a name and a future imagined, never had the chance to enter the world. 3 lives, erased not by fate, but by choices. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is how quietly it all happened. How many warning signs were brushed aside? How many moments felt small at the time, but proved irreversible in the end? So the question remains, not just for investigators or courts, but for all of us. How do we notice the danger before it turns into tragedy? How do we protect the vulnerable before silence becomes permanent? If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts. Talk about it. Because remembering these lives is one small way to ensure they are not lost twice, once in violence, and again in forgetting.